Hey everybody, it's Livin the Dream time. I'm Rishi Barran and we are to episode number 24. I would love to break in some Jack Bauer music and yell some stuff and point my gun around like the show 24. But my guest today, it's cool to be on Zoom with him because I've probably been on Zoom with him more than any other student over the course of my time at Full Sail, and we'll explain why in a little bit. Justin Velazquez joining us from Syracuse, New York, which is only, Justin, about 35, 40, 45 minutes away from where I grew up. So welcome, and I hope you're enjoying the summer in Syracuse while it's still warm.
Rishi, yes, moving here from Florida was definitely something, especially in the middle of winter. But always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, of course, Justin. It's always fun to talk to you. And literally just minutes ago, Justin broke some news to me. He is the new day of reporter for Spectrum News One CNY in Syracuse. He's been there for about what? You're closing in on a year there now, right, Justin?
I started the week of Thanksgiving, and it was interesting starting kind of in the holidays where a lot of different people were going on vacation in a whole new market. But these last, I guess, eight months have been a thrill.
Well, Justin has been on quite the journey since graduating from the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. He's had a lot of different work opportunities. Play by play is his true passion, but now he's working in reporting and doing a heck of a job with it. By the way, I just watched a couple of his pieces and really proud of him. But before we get into all that, Justin, where did this dream of being in broadcasting and sportscasting start for you?
Started in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I grew up there with my dad. I always loved sports. I unfortunately haven't picked the right teams. I'm a Mets, Jets, Knicks, and Rangers fan. As we talk now, the Mets traded half their team. But it started on the Lower East Side, watching the Mets on Pix 11, and listening to Gary, Keith, and Ron, and watching whatever sport could be on, whether it was the Mets, football, basketball, et cetera, et cetera. And it's funny, when I was little, right across the street from where I lived was a little softball field, and there would be softball games being played, and I used to kind of be behind the fence as the broadcaster in a sense, not thinking that broadcasting would be something I would eventually love to do as a career, just doing it because I couldn't play, and I thought it was fun to talk about it. So my dad and I actually had that conversation every now and then, like, hey, it's funny that you're doing this now after you used to do it when you were like 6 7 years old at these random softball games. So it's been something.
You said you picked the wrong teams. We'll see, though. I mean, the Jets, they got a guy I don't really like very much, Aaron Rodgers, coming in this year. But look, you live in New York. There's a lot of teams to pick from. And I don't know why, but it always seems like people who like the Jets also like the Mets. How did those end up being your four teams as a kid?
Yeah, on growing up, we didn't have a lot of TV channels. We had about 20 on an antenna. And one day, random day, I was just flipping through the channels and found Pix 11. And that's how I found the Mets. And just from that day on, I was a Mets fan. And it started from there. And I would watch every time the Mets were on Pix 11, and it came to a point where, like, we didn't have SNY. So out of the 162 games the Mets play, I couldn't watch like 130 of them. So I would literally follow on game day, on like kind of how I'm sitting now on my dad's computer, on his work computer. I would beg him to let me at 7 o'clock, let me use the computer until about 10, and just follow the game. And then from baseball, I eventually went to football and the Jets. I don't remember how I became a Jets fan, but my first year watching the Jets was '09. They made the AFC Championship game that year, so made sense. Everybody in New York is a Knicks fan. And I guess I just adopted the Rangers as my hockey team. So it was like a development from baseball.
there's nothing like growing up in New York, and it's as passionate a sports city as you're going to find anywhere. What was it like for you being a kid in such a big city with so much going on?
It was definitely an experience. It was just my dad and I. Um, my dad worked as a real estate broker in the city, which is a very it can be very fulfilling job, but also a very stressful job. So like he worked paycheck to paycheck, but he only got a few paychecks a year. But when he got a paycheck, it was like a whole party. You could sense it in the small little apartment we lived in. But he dealt with he always made sure to take care of me, but he was definitely dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety with his job and to care for me. I'm the baby of 5 kids, and my closest brother to me is like a decade older than me. So he wasn't really expecting to have me, but he had me, and was kind of something where like, okay, I've got another kid here. I gotta take care of him. So always been very close to my dad. My final show at Full Sail, he was there. I made sure I wanted him to be there. And just in the city, a lot of kind of the Lower East Side of Manhattan is kind of a close knit community where I'm at. I know it's a big city, but where you're walking around there, if you're just walking, you'll see people, that you know. So it was definitely had a small group of friends talking to my dad, uh, being with my dad. It was a fun journey to kind of grow up there, and man, I love that place. I always it's cool now where I could just drive down 4 hours and go down and be there for a weekend if I wanted to. So that place is always home.
Justin's dad is his biggest fan, and Justin just showed me a picture of his dad decked out in his Spectrum gear, and it's pretty funny. And it was a little different for me because I'm used to seeing Justin's dad wearing this Stetson hat. We were watching a clip of Justin do play-by-play. Was it Orangewood Christian? Who was it that you were doing the play-by-play for?
When I was at Full
At
Sail,
Full Sail, yeah.
I did it at Orangewood Christian. I did it for Prep Baseball Report too.
Well, I'm trying. It was football though, so I think it was
Oh,
Orangewood
Orangewood,
Christian. Yeah.
yeah.
So we see this guy. Justin was like shooting something. We see this guy like rolling by in this Stetson, and I'm like, who's that guy in this Stetson? And just like, oh, that's my dad. And I've been fortunate to meet him a couple of times, and it's clear that he's had a big influence on you. What did you take from growing up with him that you think has helped you as you've grown into an adult now?
I think the biggest thing my dad tried to preach was have a positive mindset. Um, he, my dad is a very positive guy. I will never meet anybody with a bigger personality than my father. He stands out everywhere he goes. He could go to literally to wash clothes. My man will wear a suit with a Stetson hat and some nice, just polished dress shoes and look like the best dressed man wherever he's at. And he's the guy where on like a 30-minute train ride, he'll make 3 new friends. That's my dad. So he always uh made sure I had a positive mindset in whatever I do. And just applying it to this industry, whether you're doing play by play and you're calling, I've called 4 baseball games or a day. I did 8 youth football games in one day one time. Um, so those are long days, and you've got to find a way to get through that while putting your best foot forward and putting something out there that can be respected, that you feel good about. And so you can't do that without having a positive mindset. Being a reporter now, for Spectrum News One, it's you have tight deadlines. If there are days where something breaks in like the late afternoon, and you've got to go get interviews, shoot B-roll of it, and you got to turn a package in like an hour and a half, and you got to be ready to be on camera to front that package and have that ready for air. So throughout, there are a lot of stresses this industry brings, And so having a positive mindset, staying within yourself and really thinking about like, I'm doing what I want to do. There are not a lot of people that get to say that. So that's something my dad always made sure I understood.
We're talking to Justin Velazquez, the former voice of the Rochester Honkers. We'll get to that later. Just wanted to say that. It's just fun to say. But you mentioned earlier having the commentary you did when you were really young. Then you started going through school and eventually get to high school and all of that. When did you zero in on, wow, I want to be a broadcaster?
It was probably my junior year of high school. High school was probably, not probably, high school was definitely the hardest time of my life. My dad married my stepmom, which ironically is the greatest thing to ever happen to me. But we moved 3 or 4 times in that span. I moved from New York to Tennessee to 2 places in Florida, eventually settled in Port St. Lucie. And there was something in me where I was just not myself. I had a little more anxiety than I usually have. I was just not liking where I was at. And that caused me to really not take high school that seriously. I was the guy junior and senior year in high school that literally missed about 50 days of school each year. The only reason why I didn't fail high school was my dad would literally would send excuse letters for my absences. That's the only reason why I did not fail high school. And what happened, I guess I just got depressed and I was in a very bad place. And there would be nights where I would almost like cry myself to sleep every now and then, because all I wanted to be was happy, and I didn't feel happy at that time. And eventually, my junior year, well into my junior year of high school, I still didn't know what college I was going to go to. I wasn't sure if I was going to go to college, and just kind of thought back to like, what do I love? And throughout this entire time in life, good, bad, whatever, the constant thing that I always loved was sports. And I knew I was not good enough to play sports, but I loved talking about sports. So in my junior year, I looked for places where I could be involved in sports and become a broadcaster. And I found the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, I think on Facebook, and had a 3-hour conversation with someone. I wish I remember this person's name, but I got a call just to learn about the program and hopped on a call with someone, and we talked for a couple hours. And at that point, I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. I'm going to stay in Florida. At that time, a lot of my family was moving to Florida from New York. So I'm like, okay, I can stay close to family. So that's what eventually, like, I went throughout the process, got accepted, and eventually came to the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. But there was definitely a time in high school where I was not in a good spot at all, and just went back to really just thinking about like, what do I love to do? Oh, I love this. So why don't I just do that?
And then you came to us, and that guy who missed school 50 times a year was one of the hardest working people I've ever seen. So what changed for you when you got to us?
Honestly, I just hated not feeling good about myself and what I was doing. Um, Amidst all those absences, I was probably late like every day in high school too. And I just hated being late and feeling like I was just wasting my time, not really providing any value to anyone around me or myself. So I came, and the full honest truth, I chose the extended program because I wasn't sure if I could really handle the accelerated program. So that's why I did 29 months and not 20 months. And eventually I found something I love to do, and I was doing it every day. And it was to the point where like I knew high school wasn't who I actually was, but it took a while to like get over that thinking of like, hey, you're not lazy, you're not, a nobody. You can do something. Just get out of that mindset of being down on yourself and gain some confidence. And throughout my time in the program, I started to gain more and more confidence. Really, the program, I found myself in the program. I learned more about myself in the program than anywhere else. So that's really what changed was I was doing what I love to do every day, and I didn't want to do really anything else. So I was doing what I love to do, and I kept doing it.
You say you found yourself. What did you learn about yourself when you came to Full Sail?
What did I learn about myself? I think the biggest thing I learned about myself is um that I am a person that is very goal oriented and career oriented and a hard worker, because in high school I was none of those things. So to go here to the program and do well initially, I was gaining confidence, excuse me, every single day I was in the program. Um, and I think the biggest thing I learned was just like, yeah, I am a good human being, because there were times in high school where I wasn't sure I was a good human being and someone that, my family should feel proud of. And over time, I think the biggest thing was just gaining confidence and believing in myself. That was the biggest thing.
You ended up early on, things changed as you were in the extended program, but early on you were part of a big group that was probably as much camaraderie as we've had with any class, with a lot of colorful characters like JD and James and Ben and Lakia and all of them, right?
Mhm.
What did you take from that early experience of having those friendships?
Just relationships. I always uh just a part of that high school experience. Like I didn't have much of any friends. I might have had a handful of friends, being generous. Um, and so the biggest thing was just seeing other people around me also work hard and also be, have a goal and stay to it. I think what really helped me was like being around JD who and James, who have like lived life and are not going into college as who like I was, like a 20-year-old, really liking sports. So seeing other people uh uh, have those goals and be set on accomplishing their goal and their dream pretty much inspired me to do the same. Um, yeah.
Well, I remember when you got to broadcast writing, and this was right around the time when I was, switching to teach a different class, and Mike Stinton was coming in to teach broadcast writing. And so you kind of had both of us for class that month, I remember. And you set the record for, by far, it wasn't even close, for the most IL hours in the history of that class. And it was because every night you would go home and watch like multiple games, and you would record a on-camera lead, or it was like, what was it, like a 45-second like recap of the
I
game?
did a
I
bunch
think
of
that's what it was.
recaps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you would watch the game and you would come up with a story angle and you would do that. And I could see over the course of the 100 million of them that you did that you got better each time that you did it. What was that experience like for you in terms of helping you to grow in really a number of different areas?
That was awesome. Every night I was watching sports. So I was just like, in addition to watching sports, why don't I also do something that can help me improve instead of just watching to be a watcher, just consuming the content. why don't I also like think about what other people in the industry are thinking about as they watch and like apply that into a recap? I remember on NFL Sundays, I would literally every single 1 p.m. I would spend a 4 o'clock window recording recaps of all the 1 p.m. games. And I would write down stats of kind of like, hey, this is what Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions today. The Jets lost this, this, and this, et cetera, et cetera. Tom Brady threw 5 touchdowns. Gronkowski broke this record. Boom, boom, boom. And would be on camera because I was not comfortable on camera at all at that time. My day at the tour, that video of me doing the stand-up, I think of the Packers game lead in, was terrible. I was so bad. I had the mic right here and I was pressing on it a couple times. I was so nervous. So I was like, the only way I'm going to get better is by doing this. So let me do it. I'm already watching the games. I already feel like I have knowledge of it. So let me take that and do stand-ups and really use my time the way I should be using it to improve myself.
When did you actually start believing that, hey, I'm pretty good at this?
That is a great question. Man, I am not 100%. I think when right before COVID, when I was really getting into the Rollins games, that was when I started doing the weekly feedback sessions with you and Mac. I started them with Mac, and I would record myself doing play-by-play from like the TV, watching Met game on MLB TV, and then at the Rollins games, the website for some of the baseball games, and so I think it was the softball games actually. The game wouldn't come up right away. You'd have to wait to watch the game. So I would record the play-by-play on my phone, and I would talk to Mac about it, talk to you about it, and get feedback that way. And I felt like that. I felt like then, even though I was doing play-by-play for the first time, I felt like I knew what I was doing, and I felt like that was when I really saw that, okay, I'm getting much better at this. I'm applying what I'm learning in the classes, in the studio, and I'm applying that into play-by-play. And I feel like while there are a bunch of things I could be doing better, I feel like I'm not a complete disaster at this. And I feel like there's a foundation here that I can grow upon. That was probably the first time where I felt like, truthfully, where I felt like I was pretty good.
What motivated you to reach out to Mac and reach out to me to take that extra time to have these sessions?
I was already taking the extra time to do the stand-ups and the additional play-by-play off my phone before COVID hit, where I took it to a completely different level.
Yeah, we'll get there in a minute.
But I was doing that, but I knew I could be doing more, because I think one of the biggest things that I always try to make sure I have in my head is, while reps are going to get you, more reps are going to make you better. That is true. But if you're not critiquing those reps, there's a ceiling. You need to critique what you're doing to really catch on any bad habits, any crutches you have. Because if you're just doing something and you're not looking over it, over time you will figure things out and you will get better, but you won't pick up on any crutches. Maybe you're saying the same descriptive word over and over again. You won't pick up on that. So while the reps are so important, critiquing the reps, whether it's yourself or someone like Rishi, Mac, Gus, Jeff, Ratcliffe, is just as important. So that really was in my head, was like, okay, I'm doing this. Let me break it down beyond the class feedback I'm getting. Let me get even more feedback and really take this to somewhere where I could grow exponentially.
It takes a lot of courage to do that, because I don't care who you are. I don't think anybody enjoys having people tell them that you could do this better, you're not doing this right. And as much as we preach how important it is, that doesn't make it easy. So how did you get to the point where you were so open to all this feedback, and then you would immediately apply it and we would see the results?
Just the desire to be better, honestly. Like, even today, I left work today. I wanted my boss to look over a package I did that I turned over the weekend that he didn't get to see. We watched it, and we were talking about my packages, my plan packages, because I'm going to be moving into this new role on Monday. And I asked him, like, hey, I've been doing these plan packages for 7-8 months now. I asked him what's good, but I also asked him, what do you think is bad? What is not up to par? Because you could be getting all this good feedback. That's great, but it's not perfect. There are negatives somewhere in there. You need to know those negatives just as much as you know the positives, because it's just going to make you better. So I looked at it that way. I never looked at it as an insult, never tried to look at it as an insult, because really that's just hurting you, because you're almost like blinding yourself to any negative feedback or criticism. I always looked at it like, hey, this person is trying to help me. They're being honest with me. They're taking their time, extra time, to talk to me. So like, this, any negative feedback is not because they like don't like me or hate me. It's because they want to see me succeed and get better. So that's how I always viewed it.
We're talking to Justin Velazquez, day of reporter for Spectrum News 1 CNY, new role that he's diving into, which we will chat about more in a few minutes. But you mentioned the Rollins games. What was that experience like for you, getting into that, something you were so passionate about with the play-by-play?
Experience was cool and short because of COVID, but I remember every weekend I would call one of the softball games, and when the softball team was like phenomenal, and it was just so fun to like fill out the scorebook and be at the game, and not only outline kind of how you wanted the broadcast. You don't want to outline how the broadcast would go, but you like to have an idea of like what you want to introduce a player with, any stories you'd like to talk about. And of course the game dictates what you actually say in the game throughout the broadcast. But it was so much fun, because like my idol is Gary Cohen. I love Joe Davis, love Mike Tirico, Al Michaels. I love Joe Buck. I know there's not a lot of people that like Joe Buck. I think Joe Buck is phenomenal. So, and like going back to those softball games back when I was little, I would do play-by-play of it. So there's something about play-by-play that I love, because every single game, especially in baseball, when they're every day, is a different story. All you're doing is telling a story, and it's completely different. We had, like, back with the Honkers, we had one game that ended, it was like 17-8 with a bunch of runs scored, and the next game was 1-0. Like, it's that where it's like one game is, wow, this player went 5 for 5 with 7 RBIs, and the next one, this pitcher was the player tonight because he went 8 scoreless with 11 punch outs. So that I loved how each game brought a different story. You had different storylines. In baseball and softball, the starting pitchers are so important. There are different starting pitchers in every game. So combining all of that is why I really love that.
And you embrace the storytelling, and every time that I would watch your clips, I could see how hard you were working to make sure you didn't neglect that part of it. And you're right, it was a short experience with Rollins because COVID hit and that took you out of the classroom for a long time. But you didn't let that stop you. Can you share with us what the process was you went through to keep getting experience when everybody else was shutting it down and saying, oh, there's no sports, I can't do play-by-play?
Yeah, so I started calling games off of my computer, very much like this at home in Port St. Lucie, and just called like a couple games a week. And not only called it, I wanted to learn how I could improve pretty much all aspects of calling the game, preparing for it. How do I properly prepare? How do I prepare efficiently? Opens, I did a couple opens. How do I really run down a good solid open to concisely tell the viewers what to expect in this game in about 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and then calling the game. How do I first three innings? How do I introduce the players and the pitchers and the storylines in the first couple innings? Where could I weave stories in? And whether and late in the game, what do I do in a big situation? Do I, keep talking? Do I lay back? How do I approach that? I wanted to learn everything like about that. And at that time, well, I became a STAA member. And there's a really good resource they have about calling baseball where this can apply to softball too, where you split the game into thirds. So the first three innings in the baseball, you're introducing storylines, the starting pitchers, the key position players. That's where you're introducing what you're telling the viewer what to expect in this game, who are the big players, et cetera, et cetera. The middle three innings 4 to 6, are your storytelling innings where you can tell a story about the starting pitcher if he's having a great game. If there's a pitching coach that a coach that's got a great story, you can do that. A player, those are kind of the innings where you really approach kind of learning more about the player and what his or her story may be. And the last three, you get back to, if it's a close game, you get back to kind of back into the game and what's at stake in this game, really focus back into kind of, all right, second and third, 1 out, the tying run is in scoring position. We got to nail this call here, getting back into those situations.
And you would literally take hours to prepare for this. So it wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna grab a roster and whatever. You were making game boards for this. You were doing this as if you were actually a professional calling the game. How did the totality of all of those experiences make this a great substitute where you actually grew a lot doing it?
Yeah, I almost approached it as if I was a play-by-play broadcaster. And so I had just bought the Bob Carpenter scorebook that Mac showed me. I recorded every game. They're on a hard drive somewhere in here. I think it's in my bag in my living room, but I still have all of them. I just it was huge for me because I had the play-by-play reps taken away from me. So there are still ways to get those play-by-play reps. I could go on YouTube right now and find a bunch of different full games or condensed games, baseball games, football games, basketball games, hockey games, etc. So it was huge because I was learning about preparing. I was learning, the intricacies of every single part of broadcasting, because if you have a foundation of all these different aspects of broadcasting, not just calling the game, but what you do before and after the game and how to critique yourself, you can turn that into a good broadcast, because you're not going to have a good broadcast if you don't prepare for the game. So how do I prepare in the best way? I scored every game. It's funny, I would tell my parents, like, hey, because at the time I was living with my mom, my stepmom, and my dad. I was like, hey, I'm about to call a baseball game off my computer for 3 hours. I'm gonna be pretty loud here, so I apologize in advance. I did that a couple times a week. I think for a couple months I did about 40 games, 30 to 40 games, and did everything. It would be kind of this thing where I'd attend all my classes, I'd get all my work done, but once I had that done, I would start getting after it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna call this Mets Braves game on this day. I'm not gonna look at their statistics. I'm gonna go from this. I think I just did that to the camera. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm gonna from that day before. I'm gonna look at all the statistics, the storylines of the team, learn about all of this stuff to then apply that into calling this game on my computer and learn the basics of like just the basic function of how to call a ball in play, how to be concise, where to look if there are runners on base, how to be on top of it. Because I knew at some point I would eventually call games in person again. And so I could take all this stuff I learned and just put that into a game in person and just adjust to the speed of that game because it'll be quicker because it's not off a computer. That was huge. That was I think the biggest learning experience I had in the program because every day I was doing something.
You got to take your disadvantage and make it an advantage, and that's what Justin did. And I mean, he would literally, he had MLB Pass, and he would watch some of these games live and do it while that was happening. And then afterward, he would take his recording and then he would put crowd noise underneath it that he found from some random spot. And then he'd play them for me and Mac every week and get critiqued. And then, as he mentioned earlier, the growth just continued as he went through that. But eventually, Justin, you did get back to campus. And when you did get back, you dove into as many opportunities as possible. And, Ness Vera hooked you up with some good opportunities. He's in the music entertainment business program. And you got the opportunity to do the PFL stuff with Zach Grady and some other great people in our program. I know you and Zach have built a friendship that started with you having those sessions with me, which was a lot of fun. And by the way, it is episode 24, Zach. That is the Kobe Bryant episode. So you got your wish there. But you also did the entertainment show with Ellie Davis and some other people. What was it like getting involved in so many different types of activities when that window finally opened and you were able to get back?
Yeah, it was fun working with Ellie and Zach, Brandon, Michelle, with the PFL, the entertainment show, Orange with Christian, which eventually turned into Prep Baseball Report. It was a ton of things. And when I got back, I had 4 months left in the program, something like that. And I was just like, I'm just gonna go all in on everything. Any single opportunity that is approached my way, I'm gonna somehow figure out a way to make it work. And it was so amazing to work with them. And Zach was such a huge part of my experience in the program because calling games off computer, like over time, that's not exactly the a fun thing to do all the time. So there was a time where I got a little kind of tired of it and connected with Zach, and we were doing live games. We did a Mets Blue Jays game live when the Mets announced their lineup like 15 minutes before the game. So those are just eventually I was just like, I just want to get all the reps I can possibly get in and outside of class, and take the relationships, critique it, enjoy the experience, and turn, and in some way this is going to help me. So I was just like, this is going to help me, let me do it.
What ended up being what you think were the biggest areas of growth for you throughout your time in the program and your biggest takeaways from being with us?
biggest area of growth was probably my work ethic. Um, Definitely my work ethic. I almost developed it from a sense of uh hating what I did in high school and just coming here with like, I'm gonna take on everything. My work ethic kind of blossomed while I was here. That's definitely the biggest area of growth. And takeaways, I mean, I made so many great relationships in the program, whether it was JD and James, Josh, Ben, Eli, um, an intro to sportscasting, to working with Zach so many times, Ellie, um, relationships with staff, you, Mac, Gus, Jeff. Oh, there's so many um people I'm forgetting. Uh, I know I'm forgetting so many people that mean a lot to me. Chris Mouton. Um, um, it was that definitely is something like I took away. It was building those relationships and just how helpful everybody was. Everyone was willing to help. It was almost this awesome family type of atmosphere where everybody was approachable and you can talk to anyone and ask anyone questions, and they would listen and answer your questions and support you. And that was um, the biggest thing for me, especially when I went to the program, because the classes were small. My graduating class was just you and I, my last class. So it definitely was like a close knit group where we, all tried to get better. And
I
it was awesome.
remember that last month we it was just us, and we called that Bills Colts game together, which was
Yes, the
a lot of
wild
fun.
card game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Philip
I
Rivers, right? Philip Rivers.
yes,
Wow.
the long touchdown. Allen hit Diggs on that long touchdown that game.
Allen fires deep. Stephon Diggs is there. He's got it for the touchdown. 35 yards from Allen to Diggs, and Buffalo takes a 2-possession lead.
I
They had
missed
that
an
controversial call at the end, I remember. So,
fumble. Right? That was fun.
but you made it. You made it through COVID. You made it through all that. You made it through 19,000 games that you did off your computer. Your dad wore the Stetson hat your last day of class. You graduated, and then you had a big decision to make because you had a potential job opportunity, but I knew your heart was in the play-by-play, and you decided to work with the Florida League for an internship and a little bit of pay, but not a lot. And you worked with the Winter Garden Squeeze, I believe, doing play-by-play for them. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I worked for two summer league teams with just the funniest names: the Winter Garden Squeeze and the Rochester Honkers. It was something else. I was so excited to do that because it was the first time where I was gonna be calling like not major league games off the screen. The Rollins games are great, but those were every weekend. This is every day. I'm going to be calling a game, and I'm gonna cover my own, not my own, but one team, and have a main focus on that team, and be around them, almost be like I was working in minor league baseball, pretty much. And gosh, I remember prepping on every single player in the league. There were like 6 teams in the Florida League that year, and I had notes on every single player on every team. There were about 30 players a team, so 180 so players. I literally had notes on. I was so ready for it. And then I was excited to see what would translate from my work just calling games from home to calling games in person in a booth. I was really excited to see like would I still be on top of everything? Would it be faster? what can I take from that and really translate over to calling the games? I knew the prep would be able to translate. And it was just this great experience of going to a ballpark every day, telling a different story every day, meeting the players, the coach. One of the funniest people I've ever met, Terry Abbott, used to be pitching coach in the Pirates and Reds organizations, I believe. It was a lot of fun, and it didn't come without its challenges. At the time, I lived in Kissimmee with my aunt, and I would drive, 3-4 hours a day just to get to the games. And the stipend I got really just went to gas. I was working for free pretty much. But it was awesome to do that. And, before the season, be in charge of writing the bios for the team, write the post-game articles, have all those responsibilities was, one of my dreams. And that was the first time I was able to do that.
And you also got a lot of freelance work with Prep Baseball Report. You mentioned it earlier, the fact that you would often have like these multiple games in a day and these long days of all those games. How did you get into that, which obviously was another opportunity for you to grow as a play-by-play voice?
Gordy, I believe, brought that to me. I think he knew Doug Freeman, who was at Prep Baseball Report. And I think he called me one day, was like, "Hey, would you want to call games for this event?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to call games 100%. Where is it?" He was like, "Daytona Beach." I was like, "I don't have a car." So I remember the first time I did it, I asked my dad to drive to Orlando from Port St. Lucie, 2-hour drive. He drove just so I could go to Daytona. They provided us with a hotel there. We stayed there. And I was able to do that event. And what they would do, they would have a doubleheader of games, 2 games on Saturday, and Sunday would be 4 games of all high school prospects who were either committed or looking to commit to colleges. And they would turn it into this tournament. There'd be 4 teams, East, West, North, South. And the winner would kind of get a baseball glove or a bat, something like that. And it was another great way to get reps. That happened, I think, right after or just about when some of the restrictions were starting to be lifted and we were back on campus. So I went from calling these games on a computer to going back on campus, being back in the studio, to now going to Daytona Beach on the weekends to do this. And that was fun. You had to prep for 120 players, something like that, for 6 games over the course of a week. And that was another way I learned about prepping and learned about the basic fundamentals of just calling a baseball game, and really just how to approach it and critique it. And then eventually I got to really learning about my voice, because gosh, I used to hate how my voice sounded. It was just another opportunity that I just was not going to say no to.
How do you handle those days when you have all those games in a row and you got to do that quick prep and that quick lineup figuring out and all that?
Oh, it's hectic. There were times as I was doing the Prep Baseball Report games where the game would start and I would only have one lineup. And that would be super frustrating because you have to look down, find the player's number. I would then go back to my iPad, match up the numbers, and then find the player, and then also write that down in my scorebook to have it for the next at bat. And it would be even more challenging because at that time in those events, they're trying to get everybody at bats, everybody opportunities to pitch. So you're not having 9 or 10 players hit. Almost 15 to 20 players are hitting. So you have these lineups where I'd have my scorebook and then another notebook with more players. And I think all those challenges of it almost made me feel better about myself. Excuse me, because if I can call a game worrying about all these different things, I feel like I'll be even in a better spot when I can call a game and every day I'm getting to line up 2.5 hours before the game and I'm able to have my scorebook down. I know who the starting pitcher is and I'm able to be organized. So that almost helped me feel better about where I was at and helped me feel better about all the work I did at home calling Mets games off a computer, because I was able to translate some of it and build a foundation to grow on for those games, and then learn from that and take it to the squeeze and eventually the Northwoods League.
And we mentioned that earlier, the Rochester Honkers. What was it like moving to Minnesota and diving into the Northwoods League and calling so many games every day and just kind of diving into something you love?
In the air, deep to left center, way back, Schwabe watches it bank off the wall. Ritzer and White score, throw to second, not in time. 2-run double, and the Honkers lead.
That was awesome. I think the Northwoods League is 68 games in 72 days, something like that. 64 games in 68 days, something like that. But that was the winner. The squeeze and the Florida League was great. But the responsibilities were still kind of somewhat limited. You would call the games, you would write the post-game recap, post it on the website. That's what you were doing. The Northwoods League, you were like in minor league baseball. You would come in, I would do the team voicemail every time there was a home game. I would be in charge of all the media. I had a bunch of credentials to give to the media. I was in charge of making the game notes for the other broadcasters, the fans, and any media that came. There was a open I had to do, an on-camera open, which the Northwoods League called a pregame show. It was a 2-minute open. They call a lot of things pregame show there. But it was a short little open that you had to do for every home game. And you'd call the games, and I was traveling with the team. I was in Minnesota. I was going to Wisconsin, went to Bismarck, Iowa with the team, calling the home and away games, home games doing a TV style broadcast, and on the road doing a radio style broadcast. And I was just really just figuring out how I can get better. And let me rephrase that. I had to figure out how to be efficient with my time, because I had a bunch of these responsibilities. I still also had to write the post-game recaps. There were games on the road. I had to do all the social media during the game. So you're doing all these different things in addition to calling the game. And while you're there to call the game, your boss wants to see, the voicemail done, the game notes done, the tweets made, the recap up in time. The game, the broadcast is almost like I don't want to speak for them and say like it's the like the last resort or the least importance, but those other things they want to see done more than the broadcast. So it was an amazing experience to really feel like you were in minor league baseball and have all the responsibilities a typical, or most of the responsibilities a typical minor league baseball broadcaster has. So to do that was ginormous. I can't tell you how much I improved over that time. And then to be able to, call one of the biggest games of the year on ESPN Plus, filling in. I learned that was an interesting experience because our season was over. We didn't make the playoffs. I stood around because we still had to clean the ballpark and everything like that. Excuse me. And the broadcaster for one of the playoff teams had to go back to school. So I was still there, and our GM was very close friends with the Wilmer Stingers, the other team, the team that needed the broadcaster that was still in the playoffs. And they were like, "Hey, we are looking for a broadcaster and a director." And so our GM, Jeremy Agard, myself, and Noah Kubal, who was a phenomenal director for us. We all went to Wilmer, 3 hours away from Rochester. Let me backtrack a little bit. I found this out a couple days before the game was actually planning on being played, but the two first round series were both sweeps. So I think I thought the game was gonna be played on Wednesday, but they moved it up to Tuesday because the best of 3 series all ended in 2 games. So they were like, let's just play it on Tuesday and not Wednesday. They moved it up. And so on Monday night, I'm watching this game, have some prep done, but I'm watching them to I knew the teams because the Honkers were in the same league as these teams. But I found out that night after both series ended, like, hey, this game is tomorrow. You've got to get on it because this game is tomorrow night. It's starting at 7:00, and it's on ESPN Plus. So that was all the work I did to learn about preparing. Went into almost all of that, just went into this because I had to prepare for this huge game, biggest broadcast of my life, and had to do the prep in pretty much a night. And it was I knew exactly like what I had built up a whole process of my prep where every single game I prepared the same way, and that's exactly what I did. I gained the efficiency to do it in a timely manner while also feeling good about what I had, and went over there, called the game, and I thought it was one of the best games I called that entire summer. It was the final game. It was the game before the championship game. It was almost like game 7 of the league championship series. Pretty much that analogy pretty much describes it pretty well. So that was awesome.
Well, to get that chance and to get that exposure really is a dream. And now you're working full time in this industry in a different type of role. What's it like for you to be living the dream now?
It's almost surreal in a sense where I didn't think I'd ever work in news. I always a huge sports fan, always wanted to work in sports and talk about sports. But it came about a very, easy thing to almost apply for. I applied for it in Minnesota. All I had to do is on CareerSync, saw a link like, hey, Spectrum News 1 is looking for reporters. All you had to do is submit your resume and you would be interviewed by the talent recruiter. So I did that. It is so different, but still just as fulfilling as the play-by-play because you're still telling stories. You're just doing it in a different way. You're not telling stories over a 9-inning baseball game that takes 3.5 hours. You're doing it in a 2-minute 30-second package. That's pretty much what I do primarily. So to go into news was very different. I have an amazing boss, Ray Sullivan, who any questions I have, anytime I want feedback, is always willing to take his time. Very much like you, Mac, Gus, and Jeff did for me, to just kind of look over my packages and just help me get better and improve. So this has definitely been a hectic, exhilarating, and fun experience. Working in news, something I've never done before. And it's very fulfilling for me to be able to go into a completely a different thing where I'm working in news and not sports, and still be able to feel like I'm telling stories well and doing my job pretty well.
What's your goal with your storytelling every time that you put a package together?
Justin Velazquez has been out there learning more about the reason behind this rather shocking rise. Justin, what can you tell us out there about what's spurring this economic growth?
I just want the viewers to learn something. That's how I approached all my learn something in and tell it in a clear, coherent way. That's how I approached my play-by-play. Like, hey, every single game, you're gonna learn something. That's gonna make you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Whether it's a statistic, or a story, or maybe it's something like that happens during the game, you're going to learn something that stands out. And that's what I want to do in my packages, whether it's, a statistic about, I did a story about what was it? And fentanyl, and really how much of a epidemic that has become. Or so you're gonna learn something, whether it's a statistic that becomes this story that's like, whoa, this is a huge issue, or you're gonna learn something, whether it's telling a story about this person. That's primarily what the packages have that I do is you're going to learn about this person. She or he has a great story. And this is her story, and this is how it applies to an issue in the world today, because all our stories have to be issue based.
All right. Well, that's awesome. And we are kind of up against it here toward the end of the hour, but I do want to dive into one other big question, which is where do you hope your dreams lead you from now on? You just got a new opportunity at your station, but where do you hope your next big dreams lead you?
Man, I really enjoy where I'm at. I love the people at Spectrum News One and my coworkers throughout upstate. But I think my heart is still right now in play-by-play, that in sports. That's what I've always loved. So while I really don't know where it'll take me, maybe I stay right here. I wouldn't be mad at that. I would be happy with that. But one day, hopefully, if I could become a voice of a Major League Baseball team, that is where I want to be.
Well, I know you'll put in the work to get there. So we got time for quick dream sequence. You ready for it? Little quick answers?
Yeah.
All right. Dream Mets infield. Give it to me. It can be either anyone who's ever played for the Mets.
Oh, gosh. Okay. David Wright is at third base. Jose Reyes is playing shortstop. I loved Carlos Delgado as a kid.
Oh, nice.
He was the first jersey I got of the Mets. He's the first baseman. And oh man, second base, I really don't know. Oh, second base, quick. Yeah, hey, Jeff McNeil just won the batting title. So Jeff McNeil.
Good. Otherwise, I was going to stick you with Tim Tuffle, and nobody wants that. All right, Dream Jets receiving core. You can pick 4 players.
Gosh.
And I'll tell you what, they don't have to have played for the Jets if you want.
Oh, okay. Shoot. Randy Moss. Jerry Rice, Brandon Marshall was a great Jet, and I'll go with Garrett Wilson.
Good. That's a good mix. 2 Jets, 2 non-Jets, and hopefully 4 Hall of Famers, right? I don't know about Brandon Marshall. I love him, though. Finally, dream ballpark to call a game at. You've already called one at the Jackie Robinson ballpark, but dream ballpark.
I don't know if it's still PNC Park, but the Pirates ballpark is my favorite in all of baseball. So if that's on the bucket list. Not only just to call a game, but to just go to a game there is on the bucket list. To call a game there would be insane.
It's a great park. Finally, what advice you want to leave anybody watching with in terms of chasing their own dreams to work in the business?
I'd say the biggest thing is to put everything you have into it. We're all in different situations. I was very fortunate to have a support system like my father, who, was like, hey, I'll take care of kind of the financials, just go after your dream. But put everything you have into it. Ask every single question you have. Attend every studio session. Be attentive, 100% attentive in every single class. Get everything out of it. Do the reps not only in class, but outside of class, because that's really what's going to help you, is doing them as much as possible, but not only get all your reps in, but critique those reps. Save everything. Every single package I've done for Spectrum, I still have on my computer. Save everything, critique it all, and feel like at the end of your time in the program, you don't regret anything.
Well, I don't regret asking Justin Velazquez to be guest number 24. A wonderful time. Justin, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening, and now you can go enjoy that pizza you've been waiting on for all that time. Everybody else, keep on living the dream.